The wind was dry that morning, bone dry, with a taste of dust and dread. Clara Hensley stirred the tin pot over the fire, listening to the gentle bubbling of the beans, unaware that today, everything she knew was about to end. The prairie stretched out like a yawning beast beyond the small clearing, flat and endless, except for the line of broken hills far to the west, where shadows slept even in the morning light. She glanced toward the ridge. No sign of Jebediah. He had taken the horse again. Clara wiped her hands on her skirt, worn thin at the knees and stained with soil. The hem had once been trimmed with blue gingham lace, now frayed and colorless. She stood slowly, her back aching from a night on hard ground, and scanned the horizon. Just a wagon, a cold fire, and empty sky. Her fingers curled around the thin fabric of her apron as she felt it again, that creeping unease, like eyes behind her back. They'd been heading west for weeks, chasing land and the promise of gold. Jeb had claimed he'd found a map from a half-drunk gambler in Dodge City. Clara had believed him, at first. He'd always had a way with words like hooks that sunk deep and sweet. But the deeper they pressed into the wilderness, the colder he grew. He spoke less, drank more, watched her with a calculation that made her stomach knot. He returned just before midday, his boots crunching in the dirt. No game, no water, no explanation. "You were gone for hours," Clara said, trying to keep her voice light, though her mouth was parched. "I was getting worried." Jeb tied off the reins and dropped the canteen at her feet. It sloshed once. Empty. "You'll be worried for real come sundown," he said, eyes like flint under the brim of his hat. She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer. He turned, walked to the wagon, and began pulling out supplies, jerky, bullets, matches. Clara followed, heartbeat picking up. Jeb. Still nothing. He grabbed the rifle, then paused and looked at her. There was no warmth in that look, no kindness, just an unsettling stillness, like the silence before a storm. "I'm leaving," he said simply. "What?" "I said I'm leaving." The words hit her harder than the Wyoming wind. She took a step back. "You're joking." "No joke." He slung the rifle over his shoulder and lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "There ain't gold out here, just bones and bad luck. I ain't wasting another day with a wife who don't listen and a wagon that's falling apart." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her throat burned. "We came out here together. We made plans. You said." "I said a lot of things." The fire crackled between them, too cheerful for the moment. She stared at him, searching for the man she had married, the boy from Missouri with a crooked smile and a dream of green fields. But that boy was gone, if he'd ever really been there. "You're just going to leave me? Out here? With nothing?" He reached into the wagon and tossed something at her feet. It landed with a dull thump. "A revolver. Plenty of wolves out here," he said. "Figure you'd want something to even the odds." Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The grip was smooth, worn. It smelled faintly of gunpowder and pine oil. She looked up at him, her voice cracking. "You'll kill me doing this." He exhaled smoke slowly, like he was enjoying it. "Maybe. Maybe not. That's between you and God now." He didn't say goodbye, just mounted the horse and rode off, the dust trailing behind him like a tale of guilt he'd never wear. Clara watched him until the horizon swallowed him whole. Then she dropped to her knees. The first few hours passed in stunned silence. She didn't cry. Not then. Crying would have felt like admitting something had broken beyond repair, and she wasn't ready to name it yet. She gathered the food he'd left, half a tin of beans, a strip of jerky, 3 matches, and took stock of the wagon. The axle was cracked. No horse. No water. No map. By nightfall, the chill came hard and fast. The fire had gone cold, and she curled under a ragged quilt, listening to the coyotes sing. Every howl chipped away at her resolve. The next day she walked. South, she thought, toward the river. If she could find water, she might make it. She carried the revolver tucked in her waistband, its weight a grim reminder that every step mattered. Her boots wore blisters into her heels by noon. She rationed her jerky, 1 bite every hour. The sun was merciless, painting her skin red and raw. When she found a shade beneath a dead cottonwood, she collapsed there, fingers shaking. That night, the dreams came. Wild, fevered visions of Jeb laughing, while buzzards pecked at her bones. She woke screaming, heart pounding, and realized she'd lost her sense of direction. She tried to retrace her steps, but the prairie didn't care about human memory. Every dune looked the same. The sky was a mirror of burning indifference. By the third day, her lips cracked. Her feet bled. She tried to drink from a muddy trickle that turned out to be animal urine. The revolver stayed in her hand now, not for protection, but as a possibility, as the final option. She stared at it long and hard as the wind picked up, curling around her like ghost fingers. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky was still. The next, it was thunder and dust. Grit stung her eyes, bit her skin, filled her lungs. She dropped to her knees, coughing, trying to wrap the quilt around her head. She screamed, but couldn't hear her own voice over the howl. The world was colorless, violent, and endless. She lost consciousness not long after. There was no final thought, no prayer, just surrender. And then, light, a shape, movement, something, no, someone, stepped into the storm. Tall, silent, his face obscured by a cloth, dark eyes steady. He knelt beside her, pressed fingers to her throat. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The last thing she saw was the sun haloing behind his head like a god descending, or maybe death itself. She didn't know which. All she knew was that she wasn't alone anymore. And sometimes that was all it took to start again. The world came back in pieces, light first, too bright, stabbing through her lids like splinters. Then sound, muffled and strange. Wind rattling hide, the bubbling of water, a low hum. Clara didn't open her eyes right away. She felt the heat of a fire against one side of her face and the coolness of shade on the other. Her throat ached, lips split and dry. Her whole body felt heavy, like she'd been buried under the desert. She stirred, a faint groan escaping her lips. The pain flared in her joints as she moved, but not all of it was fresh. Someone had wrapped her arms and legs in cloth. She reached instinctively for the revolver, but her hand met only soft hide beneath her. No weapon, no familiar weight. Her heart leapt in alarm. Then she saw him. Across the small fire sat a man. His skin was dark and weather-worn, his long black hair tied back with rawhide. A necklace of bone and turquoise hung around his neck. He didn't look up right away. He was grinding something in a small stone bowl, leaves, maybe roots. The scent was sharp and earthy, bitter enough to catch in her nose. She tried to sit up. Her body screamed in protest. Easy. The word was quiet, his voice calm, accented but understandable. Clara froze. She stared at him, uncertain. He looked over, finally meeting her eyes. There was no threat in his expression, no anger or hunger. Just observation, measured and still. Where? Her voice cracked. She coughed and tried again. Where am I? The man poured hot water into a wooden bowl, dropped in the crushed herbs, and stirred. He handed it to her without a word. She took it with shaking hands, sniffed it suspiciously. What is it? He shrugged. Bitter. But it works. She sipped. It was worse than bitter. It was like drinking tree bark steeped in regret. But warmth flooded her chest, and she didn't gag, which was progress. Who are you? She asked. He didn't answer. Just returned to the small satchel beside him, sorting through more herbs. The silence stretched. I'm not a thief, you know. If you're looking for a reward, you're wasting time. Still nothing. Clara set the bowl down and tried to rise again, this time more successfully. She swung her legs over and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her thigh, where a jagged cut had been bandaged. You patch me up? The man nodded once. Why? He paused. Then, in the firelight, his voice came again, low, flat, careful. Because you were dying. Clara looked at him closely. His face was unreadable. Young, maybe. 30? Older? The hard lines of the frontier didn't offer many clues. A few faint scars crossed his cheekbone. His hands were rough but clean. He didn't fidget, didn't twitch, just watched. She shifted, trying to gauge the size of the shelter. It was a teepee, smaller than any she'd seen, just big enough for them both and sparse. A few pelts, a water skin, a small satchel of tools. Her boots sat near the entrance, cleaned and mended. Her revolver was not in sight. "You Comanche?" He didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. Clara's stomach turned. Not from fear, something else. Something deeper. Something confused. "You could have left me." Another nod. "But you didn't." His gaze held hers. "No." She swallowed. "Why?" The man looked at the fire, then the stars beyond the smoke hole. Finally, he said, "My sister. She died like that. Alone." The words dropped between them like stones in a well. Clara looked away, ashamed of her suspicion. "I'm Clara," she murmured. He nodded slowly. "Tokara." They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling. Clara didn't know what to make of him, of this strange, quiet man who had pulled her from the jaws of death and said so little. But he hadn't tied her up. He hadn't touched her. And for the first time in days, she wasn't dying. That counted for something. She slept in fits that night, waking to dreams of buzzards and fire. Once, she opened her eyes to see Tokara, still awake, sitting at the mouth of the shelter, watching the moon. He didn't speak. Neither did she. By morning, she could stand. Barely. Tokara offered her a walking stick. She refused it out of pride, then took it out of necessity. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. They walked a little that day, just to the creek nearby. Clear water trickling through the rocks, sweet and cold. She knelt beside it and drank until her stomach cramped. Tokara sat a short distance away, carving something from bone. A bird, she thought. Or maybe a wolf. "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" she asked, still staring at the water. "No. That simple, huh?" "Yes." She laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Men lie. I don't trust easy anymore." "Good." She blinked. "You don't mind that?" Tokara shrugged. "Trust is earned." Clara studied him. "You speak more now." He looked at her, then back at his carving. "You listen more." That night, he cooked something over the fire, a stew of rabbit and root vegetables. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. Her stomach felt like a shriveled sack, but it was warm, full. Afterward, she watched the flames flicker, hypnotic and strange. "Why were you out there?" Tokara asked, not looking at her. She considered lying. Instead, she told the truth. "My husband left me." He didn't react. Just took the horse and went. Left me with a gun and a prayer. Still no judgment. Just quiet. He wanted gold. Land. Thought I was slowing him down. Tokara stirred the fire with a stick. "He is a coward." Clara gave a sharp laugh. "You get that from one story?" "No. I've seen his kind before." There was a long pause. The kind where words got heavy and dangerous. "I should hate you," Clara said, suddenly. "You're Comanche. That's what I was raised to believe." Tokara nodded. "You don't." "I don't know what I feel." He stood, tossing a blanket to her. "You will." In the following days, Clara regained her strength. She tried to help, collecting firewood, cleaning fish, weaving grasses for kindling. But Tokara was faster, better, more efficient. Still, he let her try. And he taught her things without ever saying he was teaching. How to see tracks in the dirt, how to move without snapping twigs, how to listen to the wind. She asked questions. He answered when he felt like it. They spoke in short bursts, like trading cards, not conversations. But slowly, something built between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. One afternoon, Clara stumbled trying to climb a rocky incline. Her foot slipped, and she landed hard, biting back a curse. Tokara was there in seconds, his hand offered. "I can do it," she snapped. He nodded, stepped back. She climbed on her own. When she reached the top, he was already there, waiting. Later that evening, as the sky bruised into twilight, they sat side by side near the fire. He handed her a piece of cloth, stitched with her initials. She stared at it. "You fix this." Tokara nodded. "Why?" "You are not finished." She looked at him. You think I still have a purpose? He looked at the stars. You still have breath. Clara didn't reply. She didn't need to. The warmth in her chest was answer enough. But peace never lasted on the frontier. Just before dawn, distant thunder rolled. But it wasn't the sky. It was hooves. Riders. Gunfire in the distance, faint but sharp. Tokara stood instantly, bow in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. Clara gripped the revolver he'd returned to her the night before. Her pulse quickened. Who is it? Don't know yet. What do we do? He looked at her, serious now. We run. He threw her the satchel, slung his bow across his back, and led the way. They moved fast, breaking camp in seconds, horses and fire forgotten. As they slipped through the rocks and scrub, Clara didn't feel like a helpless settler girl anymore. She felt like something else. She didn't know what was coming, but she wasn't afraid to meet it. Not anymore. The sun was a red wound on the edge of the horizon, bleeding across the plains as Clara and Tokara ran. The gunfire had faded, distant now, but not forgotten. The sound still rang in Clara's ears, the echo pulsing with every step she took. Her legs burned, her lungs clawed for air, but she didn't stop. Tokara moved ahead, silent and sure-footed, cutting through brush like he was part of the land itself. Clara followed, her revolver clenched tightly in her hand, her heart pounding not just from the run, but from what lay behind, and what waited ahead. They didn't speak until nightfall. The world around them had quieted, save for the sigh of wind through dry grass and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Tokara finally slowed at the edge of a shallow canyon, scanning the ridgeline before gesturing her down. They slid between boulders and into a hidden alcove where the rock wall bent inward, forming a natural shelter. Tokara started a small, smokeless fire. Clara collapsed beside it. "Think they were looking for me?" she asked, breath ragged. "No," Tokara said, tossing a few dried roots into a pot. "Bandits. They hunt like wolves. Kill whatever slow." Clara closed her eyes. "So we're the stragglers." His silence confirmed it. Over the next few days, they kept moving. Tokara led them away from known trails, threading through ravines and canyons Clara would have never noticed. They avoided other travelers. They listened to the earth, how it cracked, shifted, whispered warnings in the dry rustle of grass. Clara learned not to ask where they were going, not because Tokara wouldn't tell her, but because she began to understand that the journey wasn't about a place. It was about survival, and something else, something unspoken. One morning, Clara woke to find Tokara already gone. Panic sparked immediately, old instincts. She jumped up, heart slamming, eyes darting. But before the fear could take full root, she saw a small stack of stones at the camp's edge, arranged in a pattern he'd shown her 2 nights before. Safe. Back soon. She exhaled, shoulders dropping. He returned with meat slung over one shoulder and a bundle of wild herbs in his hands. Clara helped skin and clean the rabbit, her fingers no longer hesitant, no longer soft. The blood didn't bother her anymore, not like it used to. That night, as they sat near the fire, she caught herself watching him. Not just watching, but seeing. The way his eyes flicked to every movement. The way he carved with slow precision, never wasting a stroke. The way he listened, not just to her words, but to her silences. "You always alone?" she asked. "Not always." She waited. "My people most are gone. Some to war, some to the east, some to silence." Clara looked into the flames. "I know silence." He didn't press. Didn't need to. The quiet between them had become its own kind of conversation. Later, she told him more about Jebediah. Not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. Enough to explain the way her hands still flinched at sudden noises. Enough to explain the scar on her ribcage, barely healed before they'd left Missouri. She told him how Jeb had once held a knife to her throat because dinner was cold. Tokara didn't speak for a long time after that. When he did, his voice was low. "You survived." Clara nodded. "Sometimes I think that was the worst part." "No," he said. "That was the beginning." The next few days brought rain, cold and sudden. They took shelter in a cave mouth, wrapped in furs. Water dripped from the stone ceiling, steady as a heartbeat. The storm howled, but inside it was warm. Tokara showed her how to make fire with wet wood, how to use moss to trap heat, how to find dry kindling even in a flood. As the rain poured, Clara asked questions about his people, his sister, his past. She was young, he said one night. Smiled too much. Trusted too easily. What happened? Settlers came. Took her. Sold her. I found her body near the river 2 winters later. Clara felt her breath catch. I'm sorry. He didn't nod. Didn't look at her. Just said, you remind me of her. It wasn't meant as a compliment, but she took it as one. The rain passed. The land changed. Greener now. Hills rolled gently instead of jutting like broken teeth. Clara's gait had changed too, stronger, surer. She no longer tripped over roots. She could load the revolver with her eyes closed. She could track rabbit prints and tell how long ago they'd passed. Tokara noticed. One morning, after she'd downed a buck with one clean shot, he handed her a bone-handled knife. What's this for? She asked. You earned it. She turned the knife over in her hand. It was old, sharp, well cared for. The handle fit her grip perfectly. Don't give this to someone lightly, he said. Don't take it lightly either. I won't. And she meant it. But nothing on the frontier stayed easy. One evening, as they set camp by a cold creek, they were ambushed. 3 men, dirty, grinning. Bandits, scarves over faces, guns drawn. One fired into the air. The sound shattered the quiet. Easy now, the leader said. We just want your things. No need for blood. Tokara moved first, too fast to see clearly. One bandit fell with a gurgle, arrow through his throat. The others shouted, fired wildly. Clara dove behind a tree, heart hammering. She peeked out. Tokara was already charging the second man, blade drawn. The third spotted her. Got you now, sweetheart. He raised his pistol. Clara didn't think. She moved. 2 shots. One missed. One didn't. The bandit crumpled, a neat hole above his eye. Silence returned, sharp and sudden. Clara's hands shook, but she stood. Tokara stepped over her body, checked for signs of life. There were none. She looked at him, wide-eyed. I killed him. You had to. He would have shot me. He nodded. And then she dropped the gun. Not in fear. Not in weakness. Just heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. Later, after the bodies were buried and the blood scrubbed from her hands, she sat beside the fire, staring into the flames. Do you feel it? She asked. Tokara looked over. What? The guilt. He was quiet. Sometimes. But more often, I feel the cost of not doing what needed to be done. She let that settle. Do you think I've changed? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tokara didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the edge of the firelight, and looked at her from the shadows. No, he said. I think you've become who you were always meant to be. Clara didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Because of clarity. She wasn't the same woman who had been abandoned in the wilderness. She wasn't the girl who flinched at raised voices, who apologized for everything, who waited for someone else to save her. She was something else now. Stronger. Sharper. Alive. As dawn painted the sky with gold, she packed her things without needing to be told. Tokara joined her. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. They had farther to go. But now she walked beside him, not behind. The dust on the trail shimmered beneath the noon sun, rising in slow waves as Clara and Tokara rode side by side through the low hills. Her mare, once thin and skittish, now moved with steady purpose beneath her. Tokara's stallion was quiet as always, a shadow at her flank. They had found the horses 2 days after the bandit ambush, half wild, half lucky, grazing near a forgotten creek. Clara had taken it as a sign. That fate, for once, was done being cruel. But peace, like all good things, was fleeting. Word of Jebediah had reached them in a trading post south of the Red Butte. A scarred trapper with too many teeth had recognized Clara's name. Told them he'd seen Jeb in Silver Ridge, boasting about a silver strike, drunk and loud, flashing a ring that matched Clara's wedding band. Her blood turned cold. Tokara didn't try to dissuade her, didn't question her resolve. He just nodded once when she said she needed to go. To see him again. To end it. They traveled fast, moving by night when the air cooled. Clara barely spoke. Memories stalked her, Jeb's voice slick with charm and venom. The taste of blood when he backhanded her into a doorframe. The endless ache of wondering why she'd ever believed him. She didn't want vengeance. Not entirely. What she wanted was freedom. And sometimes they were the same thing. Silver Ridge rose from the land like a bad tooth, crooked, mean, and hungry. The mine had dried up years back, but the saloons still breathed. The town stank of stale liquor and greed. Clara pulled her hat low and kept her hand near her revolver. They found him at the Lucky Dove, laughing too loud, his boots kicked up on a whiskey-stained table, cards fanned between his fingers. He hadn't changed. Still thick with bluster, still handsome in the way a snake was handsome, gleaming, smooth, and dangerous. But when his eyes swept the room and landed on Clara, something shifted in his face. Recognition, surprise, and then fear. He stood up too fast, knocking over his chair. Clara. She didn't flinch. Hello, Jeb. Tokara remained at her side, quiet, unreadable. Jeb glanced between them, licking his lips. What the hell? What are you doing here? I thought I'd return something, Clara said, stepping forward. She reached into her coat and pulled out the ring. It gleamed in the lamplight. You dropped this. Jeb opened his mouth, then shut it. She tossed the ring at his feet. I want nothing that ever belonged to you. Clara, listen, I didn't mean. You left me to die. He straightened. You were slowing us down. I thought you'd find your way back. You thought I'd die, she said, her voice sharp now. You hoped I would. That's the truth, isn't it? He took a step toward her. Tokara moved like lightning, blocking his path without a word. Jeb's eyes narrowed. What, you got yourself a new pet now? One of them. Tokara's hand hovered near his knife. Clara shook her head. Don't. He's not worth it. The saloon had gone quiet. Faces peered from the corners, eager for blood, but wary of drawing the first drop. Clara drew her revolver slowly, deliberately. Not aiming it, just holding it. I'm not here to kill you, Jeb. That would be too easy. I'm here to show you that you didn't break me. He smirked, but it faltered. You tried to bury me out there in the dust, but I climbed out. I learned to live. I learned to fight. And I learned who I am. He took another step. You think you're tough now? You think you're free? You'll always be what I made you. That's when she raised the gun. Tokara didn't move. Neither did anyone else. No, she said, eyes locked on Jeb. I was never yours. I was always mine. You just didn't see it. She could have pulled the trigger. Part of her wanted to. Part of her always would. Instead, she lowered the gun and turned her back on him. That took more strength than killing ever could. They walked out of the Lucky Dove as the stunned silence behind them cracked into murmurs. Clara's boots struck the floor like thunder. Outside, the air felt cleaner, brighter. She exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Tokara stood beside her, eyes searching her face. I thought I would want to end him, she said softly. You did, Tokara replied. Just not with a bullet. She nodded. He'll never stop running now. He'll see my face in every mirror. They rode out of town without looking back. The land stretched before them, wide and wild. No more chasing ghosts. No more chains around her heart. They made camp beneath a grove of juniper trees, the stars blinking down like old friends. Clara lay beside the fire, her hat tilted back, hands behind her head. You knew I wouldn't shoot him, she said. I hoped. She glanced at him, the firelight dancing across his face. I used to think freedom meant escaping, getting away, but now I think maybe it's just becoming. Tokara considered that. Becoming what? Exactly who I am. He didn't smile, but his eyes gleamed. They didn't speak for a while. The fire crackled. An owl called in the distance. Then Clara said, You know, I used to think the Comanche were monsters. And now, I think people lie when they're scared. And I think the ones who teach hate are usually the ones who fear losing control. Tokara nodded. It's easier to destroy what you don't understand. I don't want to live like that anymore. You won't. She turned toward him. Thank you. For what? For saving me. He looked at her, quiet for a beat, then said, You saved yourself. She smiled. Maybe. But I needed a witness. He nodded slowly. Then I was honored. The fire burned low. The night wrapped around them. Clara knew she'd never be the woman she was before Jebediah. She carried scars, inside and out. But she also carried something stronger. A fire that no one could put out. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was riding toward something. Toward the unknown, yes, but on her terms. The next morning, before the sun had even crested the hills, they packed their things. Clara mounted her horse, glancing once more at the east, where she'd come from, where pain still lingered like a ghost. Then she turned west, toward the frontier, toward freedom, toward the wild. And as the horses kicked up dust beneath them, she didn't feel like a girl lost in the wilderness anymore. She felt like the storm. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.